2022 meeting of the Health and Human Services Committee to order. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 3, public comment. I don't believe there is anybody here for public comment. Was there anybody that had signed up for public comment? All right, moving on to item number 4, the approval of the June 1st, 2022 Health and Human Services Committee meeting minutes. Everyone should have had those in their packets, so do I have a motion? First by Leahy, second by Covelli. Is there any additions, corrections, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, policy issues, discussion, and possible action. 5A, recommendations to Executive Committee for updates to strategies, objectives, and expected outcomes found in the 2018-2022 strategic plan. And those 3 questions from Vice Chair McEwen. Will you be leading our discussion today? Oh, right, I took yours.
That's okay. Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone, staff on the Health and Human Services Committee. The reason for my return is to follow up on your last meeting we had on June 1st about the discussion on the strategic plan and the comp plan. After that meeting, we did have a meeting with the executive committee. And we determined that after a long discussion with updates, scrapping the entire strategic plan, it was a consensus that we were going to ask all the standing committees to consider the 3 questions which are on your agenda again today, to try to update any strategies, outcome measures, or any new objectives. So the Health and Human Services Committee is the lead committee for 3 of the 12 objectives that we have on the strategic plan. The purpose of today's discussion is what I'm asking the committees to do is to review each one of those objectives. And 3.3 is the first objective that Health and Human Services Committee is the lead committee for, and that's to ensure that every child makes it to adulthood with health, stability, and growth opportunities. And does everybody have this copy of this one? Because on 3.3, and with the first question, as far as strategies, are there any strategies that needed that you feel need to be added to 3.3? And there's 5 of them on there now. And at the last meeting, there was a request to have some updates as far as where some of these objectives were going. And I did talk with Lance after the meeting, and I want to thank him and the department heads and all their staff for coming up with some very quick updates. Normally this would probably take a year to do, and they did it in a couple days, so I want to thank them for gathering that. And that information, I don't know if you want to put that up, Administrator, as far as the updates on 3.3. And did the committee get the email from them? Okay, did you have an opportunity to look at them? Okay. And I guess I don't want to lead all this. I guess if there's any questions as far as what's been accomplished or any of those 5 strategies that are on 3.3, are there any additional strategies you think need to be added? Because under 3.3, there's actually 8 objectives under Chapter 3. And 3.3 was chosen to be put on the strategic plan, and 3.7 was also chosen to be on the strategic plan. But my question for the committee and all the committees is, are there any strategies that you feel need to be added to accomplish this objective? So I don't know if the committee has any thoughts. If there aren't any changes, or this is our strategic plan. We're going to update it. This is going on 5 years old, and it expires the end of the year. So, and things have changed in the last 5 years, and we just want to make sure that this is current and the current issues are represented under this objective. So I don't know if there's any discussion, and I don't expect all the answers. I will be back for another meeting, but what we're looking at is to have these recommendations from these 3 questions, and the first one, like I said, has to do with the strategies that are above every one of the objectives. And like I said, so if you had time to look at them and you want to discuss any of the strategies or feel that there should be another strategy added, to this objective, that's what we need to know. And like I said, those are the recommendations we're going to bring back to the executive committee. So with that, any thoughts on the strategies?
Yeah, so thank you. But I was just wondering, when it comes to child development, I noticed that there isn't really any strategies about preparing parents or really educating parents on how to parent well. And I think that child's development really isn't our job completely. But definitely we're supposed to, I'd say there's definitely things we should have in place to help people parent well. So I think that a strategy of maybe helping parents parent well or give them different opportunities. I had a great discussion with a gentleman who's got 2 kids who have graduated out of the school system here, and I really emphasized, like, I felt like it was my job to raise my child, and so I think we need to try to maybe come up with a strategy that emphasizes helping parents to be able to parent better, maybe. Yeah.
And thank you for the comment. And I don't know, we have the health officer here, but I know we do have a program called the Start Right program. Now, I don't know all the details of it. I don't know if, Joan, you know too much about it, or you want to, but that's what came to mind when you brought that up, was the Start Right program, so.
Hi, I'm Laura Scuderi. I'm the health officer. So we do have a program called Start Right. It is a prenatal and postnatal home visiting program, and what it does is it essentially works with parents and families to make sure that they have what they need in order to set them up for success. It's been a great program. It's evidence-based program. We are looking at how we might change the program slightly in the coming year. So that'll be something that we discuss in the future.
Old habits.
I think Supervisor Covelli, were you next?
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that I'd like to do is, since we just got this update on Monday, which was a holiday, I'd like a chance to review it and come back and get you some information on my thoughts. I'm also on the same page, with Supervisor Niemeyer, that I think we need to look at parenting pretty heavily, because I think that's one of the things in our society today is maybe, we're lacking some of the moral compass in our lives, right? And some parents might be lacking that as well. And how do we get that back into the system? And how do we get them, on board with moral compass and being able to parent correctly, and, the services that we may provide for that, so.
Thank you, and that's what I meant. And thank you for bringing that up. I know you just got this on Monday, so I didn't expect to get all your solutions or additions to it until you could see what has been accomplished. So, but it was on Monday, and like I said, it didn't give you a lot of time to review it. So certainly, I don't expect you to have the answers for this. So like I said, I will probably be back next month, so if give you time to do that.
Go ahead, Supervisor Arstead.
Thank you. I agree with Ron and Bobby. You know, the prenatal and postnatal is fabulous to have that out there, but it's the development of the family unit as they grow and helping those parents understand how to parent and within the law. So I agree with both of them.
Administrator Leonard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think this is a great discussion, and you guys are going to hear, not to jump ahead, and I don't want to, but you're going to hear from Vicki today talk a little bit about, what the role of social services is. And I appreciate the comments that, hey, parenting is a huge part. Totally agree. Your last comment, Supervisor, about within the scope of the law, I want to again make very clear, government has a role, and it isn't to help every family parent to the level that you or I or anyone else feels is appropriate. We have mandates under the law, and Vicki's going to talk about what those are. And I think that's really important. And you guys, this is the presentation that Chair McEwen gave yesterday to ERC started with the idea of what do you think we should be working on? How should we be helping? How should we be devoting our time? And that, from a high level, is, I believe, was framed up by Chair of ERC Langenhan as kind of the discussion. And I think it resonated with me. At the end of the day, staff are working on things that either fall in one, and this is oversimplification, but one of two buckets. One is the stuff we have to do, and Vicki's going to tell you a lot about the stuff we have to do. And then there's the stuff we don't have to do, but it's discretionary. To your points about parenting programs, if we wanted to look at providing something generally applicable to the entire community, we'd have to look at, does this fit under Chapter 59 to something we can do? And then you, as the county board, appropriate funds for it. But I think that's a very helpful way to look at it, which is, again, where are staff spending their time, energy, and effort? And we'll help you with, when you have questions about what is the law, to Supervisor Arsted's point, about what it is we need to do and how those things that are mandated have programs that are generally in alignment with those things that support our work to address mandates. But if you do have new and innovative programs you'd like us to look at, please, this is the time to share those. And I think a great resource, to Supervisor Cavelli's point, we got you that information as quickly as we could. But not only look at that, but also look at the Wisconsin Counties Association and the National Association of Counties. They have a lot of good resources about ways that counties are tackling a lot of the areas that, again, they are mandated to provide service within, and those areas that they're not. So if you do have any questions at any point when you review the document, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. I had one item for 3.3 that I heard about at one of our previous county board meetings. There was concerns about alcohol use in youth that came up on the survey that the schools take. So I don't know if this would be a good place to add a strategy regarding drug and alcohol use in youth, or if that fits in a different objective, but I think that is something worth considering, since we did hear that it was a concern and an issue. And then removing the completed strategies, will we be doing that? Like in the update, it indicates that strategy C and E are complete. So does that mean we're taking those out because we've completed them?
That would be up to this committee.
Okay.
And there's probably some others. Even some of the outcome measures, I got one here completed on the outcome measure number 3. So like I said, that, and I believe Administrator Leonard, would we remove those, or we haven't got to that point of
Okay.
removing anything because we haven't completed a lot of the strategies in the outcome measures.
Okay, and then I did have a question regarding outcome measures. To update any of these or create new ones, will we be getting guidance from the people who who work on this stuff. I mean, I could throw out any random number I want and say this is what I want, but if it's not in the scope of a realistic goal, do we have any guidance on what is realistic or?
Well, we can certainly provide you that if you have any questions about whether or not any of the goals are realistic, or if you don't think they're appropriate. We do have within the document that I provided a couple of areas. The one that's sticking out to me is within Infrastructure Committey. Within the purview of the Infrastructure Committee, there's a goal relative to reducing crashes on the county highway system. And the recommendation from the Highway Commissioner and the Highway Department is perhaps there's a better measure than crash reduction. And instead, we are recommending a measure, quite honestly, that's very similar to outcome measure 3 with respect to 3.3. And that is, let's implement some practice changes or infrastructure changes with the goal of limiting or reducing crashes or addressing safety concerns, because it was felt with respect to staff that really perhaps the number of crashes are largely outside of our control, our direct control. We can take direct control with respect to the infrastructure itself. So if you do if you have any questions about, the thought process behind any of the outcome measures, I'm happy to provide you my perspective, having been a part of the conversations at the board level, observing them as to what led to those outcome measures being selected. But I'll say this often, this is your strategic plan. It's you directing staff. So if you want us to work towards something else, please let us know what that is, and we'll do our best to meet those goals and expectations.
Okay.
And if I may add, I know last time we met, I brought up 4.1, which is community character, and 4.1 is to promote a variety of safe and affordable housing options that meet the needs of all community members. And I know at the last meeting you had a presentation from foster parent. I think she's here yet, but anyways, that just kind of hit me as, would this be something, I know it's 4.1, but could a strategy that may help do that, is if that would help stabilize, young people if they have a stable home to go to. The idea of foster care is to get them back to their biological parents. And I remember one of the comments was the first thing is that they have a stable, safe home to go to. Just a thought. Like I said, I don't know how or if that could fit into 3.1, or that would be something this committee might want to. That might be one of those. Is there another objective that needs to be added? 4.1. Just bring it up for discussion.
Yes, I did go back and watch our last meeting, and I think 4.1, the affordable housing, and then 10.1A, which is the childcare aspect of things, those were two that we talked about as a committee, so those were two additions on our radar. I'm not sure if we want to jump to talking about that, or do we want to move on to 3.7 and talk about additions?
That's totally up to you. Like I said, I don't plan on finishing this all up with you today, so what direction you want. I'm just giving you examples of how to answer those three questions. First of all, look at the strategies, then look at any of those strategies need to be prioritized. Is A more important, or is E more important than B? And like was mentioned, you didn't have time to look at all of them, but is there there's no rhyme or reason as the order that they were put in. So is there, the second question that was asked, do any of these need to be prioritized? And that's yes or no, or some committees might have some strategies that are more important than the others. So like I said, it's going to vary from committee to committee. So it's up to you if there's any, if you want to still stay on 3.3, otherwise we can move to 3.7. And like I said, and as was mentioned before, you didn't have a lot of time to look at the updates, which could affect a lot of them. But as far as the strategies on 3.7, which you're the lead committee on, there's 6 strategies on there. and 3 outcome measures. So if, the same would go for, reviewing those strategies, how does that affect the objective 3.7? And then as far as the outcome measures, are there any outcome measures that need to be changed or added?
Does anybody have anything for 3.7 that they wanted to discuss? The other, I talked about alcohol and drug use in youths, but I also think alcohol use and abuse in adults too is important. And I know addiction is a mental health disease, so I didn't know if that fit into there. When we look at Chapter 7, there's the objective that's really specific to heroin and methamphetamines, so I don't know if we could like sneak alcohol in that one too, but that's something that I am interested in. It doesn't necessarily fall under us, it could be under public safety, but just throwing that one out there for 3.7.
7.2, mitigate the impact of heroin, methamphetamines, that you are the lead committee on too. So,
Yes.
yeah, and as far as alcohol, it's, they were dwelling on the heroin and methamphetamines at that point in 2018 when we adopted this. Now, if there's a trend to that, maybe that's going down, alcohol is increasing. That's something that I think would fit into that objective.
Okay, go ahead.
I could maybe speak to that. So in 2020, there was a new life report, which is our community health assessment. And one of the calls to action was alcohol. So that might be new information that wasn't present when the previous process was done. But alcohol remains a substance use issue that we need to address in our community. And we do have active programming at the health department in order to combat it.
Okay, thank you. So for 3.7, does anyone else have anything? Okay, so then let's just move on to 7.2 since we're kind of going in order here. Does anybody have anything for 7.2 that they wish to see added or removed? And we'll be talking about this again. Go ahead, Supervisor Leahy.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. I don't know if it's working or not. Yes and no. Very curious about where we're at with the lawsuit that we were involved in as part of the statewide, countywide lawsuit regarding the epidemic. I don't know how to speak about it in more intellectual terms than that, but that seems like a very obvious and direct way that we can add to this particular objective.
Yeah, go ahead, Administrator.
Sure, and I'll start, and Mike can probably fill in blanks. But if you have been, I referenced before Wisconsin Counties Association, if anyone's looking for anything to do every Monday, the Wisconsin Counties Association leadership call starts at 11, and the topic of recent, over the last several months, quite honestly, has been the opioid litigation and updates from it. The first of several phases of that litigation has kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of been resolved through a settlement. That is a series of a number of the distributors have, their cases have been resolved. So the primary question before all of the Wisconsin counties and the cities that were participating in that litigation is whether or not to securitize the payments that are associated with that settlement. So the settlement itself calls for payments to be made over 18 years. The question, again, before the counties, and again, please tune in on Mondays, but it is whether or not to essentially work with the Public Finance Authority to securitize, that is, take a series of upfront payments and a shorter, well, a smaller subset of ongoing payments in light of the potential risk that one or more of those distributors may be unable to service, to pay those settlements over the life of the settlement. So that's the first question. Then to your question, Supervisor Leahy, what is what is it that we do with those funds, I think is certainly something at the end of the day, that is a county board decision. It's a policy decision of how you want to allocate those funds. There are, of course, restrictions on their use based on the nature of the settlement, and that they must be used to address the impacts or mitigate the impacts of opioid use and abuse. But that's where that is right now. The other two phases of that litigation, I believe, are ongoing. I don't know, Mike, if you have any other additional updates.
Not really, actually. I think Administrator Leonard encapsulated where we are currently. On all three phases, the remaining two phases are still in active litigation, so there is no settlement in those. But the question on the first phase, where the settlement is being presented, is the immediate question is whether counties wish to securitize the settlement amounts, and so that would be the first question. The other two phases of the suit aren't at a point where we're ready for that discussion yet.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Just to follow up on Laura's call to action for the life report, I do have the executive copy of the 2019-2021, and I thank her for bringing it up, because there are 7 call to action priorities in this life report, and it is alcohol's #1, child care, diversity, inclusion, and belonging, drug treatment and recovery, housing, water quality, and workforce development. So I don't know if these are available anymore, but this was the 2019-2021. I don't think they had an update since then, have they?
Okay, we're currently working on the update, and it will be, the next update is going to be available in June 2023. But these calls to action, you can get them if you search for United Way. It's actually on United Way's site, and you can also get through to it through Marathon County's Pulse platform as well.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I'm going to leave it up to the committee. Are there any questions? Are you sure what I'm asking the committees to do? I mean, if you're not, please, I'll try to explain it. Basically, look at the objectives that your committee is the lead committee for. Look at the strategies, look at the objective, look at the outcome measures. Is there anything that needs to be deleted, added, and like 7 point, the chapter 7, I don't know if anybody's got the full copy of this, because the executive copy does not go through, like chapter 7, there's 5 objectives. Okay, we picked 7.2. That was to mitigate the impact of heroin and methamphetamines. But if you look at, there's 4 other objectives in there, and a lot of strategies in there. Does any of those strategies, any of those other objectives, does anybody feel maybe they should be brought into this to deal with, in the next 5 years? So, that's what we're looking for. That's what executive asked me to ask all the standing committees to do the same thing. So, there's no right or wrong answer. And like I said, it's good that we have a lot of new supervisors, because when this was put together in 2006 or 2018, it came from the 2016 comp plan. So it's been around for a while, and a lot of things have changed, and we need to know that. And like the administrator said, he's going to base the budgets off of what the county board feels are important issues that we should be working on. The strategic plan, the comp plan, is all makes up his majority of his budget. So
So you'll be back at our next meeting, and are you looking for final?
I guess I'm giving you homework. If you can look at the 3 objectives that this committee has, look at the strategies, And you can get a copy, I mean, you can get the complete comp plan online, am I correct?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So, and like I said, look at the other objectives that are in those three, I mean, the other objectives that are in your three objectives that you have on here, and the strategies on there, compare them to the strategies we have on here. If you feel anything should be changed or tweaked, you know, that's what I would like to get from this committee the next round. And then you can look at the updates that the administrator sent. You'll have a longer time to look at them, so.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add today or talk about today regarding this? Otherwise, we'll discuss it again at our next meeting. Okay. And then don't forget to look at that email that came out on Monday with the, you know, status of where we are on a lot of these objectives right now. And we can talk next month with you.
Yep, that'd be great, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right, moving on to item number 5B, consideration to recommend to HR Finance and Property Committee to amend the 2022 annual budget to accept grant funds for the Family Keys pilot project. And we have Vicki Tilka and some of her associates here today.
Sure, I can tee that up. It's on your agenda, and this is the same program that was discussed at the county board last month. Aligns with, as the vice chair just referenced, several of the calls to action within the life report, including housing. But before we really talk about the Family Keys program and how it aligns with the work that we're doing, we thought it was a great opportunity to have Vicki, as well as Christy, who is the chair of the Social Services Board, come here and talk to you about, you know, I frequently talk about what is required by law, what's mandated. Well, you know, it's nice to say those things, but there are a number of new supervisors here, so we thought it was a good opportunity to sit down and have a conversation and allow you to ask questions about what are those mandated areas, how this aligns well with those mandated areas, and then address any questions you may have about the potential financial benefit of this program. So we're going to talk about how it impacts children and families, and then also how it potentially impacts the Marathon County budget, quite honestly, in a positive way. So with that, Vicki, you want to come up and I'll let you drive, and you can have the spreadsheet that is in your packet.
Okay, perfect. You can come up here too. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to start with just a broad overview of the, this is very high, I guess. Okay. Of the chapter in the statute that governs what we do for child welfare, which is Chapter 48, known as the Children's Code. And I'm going to just read this because this is really exactly what it says. In construing this chapter, the best interest of the child or unborn child shall always be of paramount consideration. So the whole chapter is written up with that philosophy in mind. And so what we're required to do as the Child Welfare Agency for Marathon County is everything from accepting child maltreatment reports where people in the community are concerned about the safety of a child, to determine, the court would determine if there's jurisdiction for the children's court to be involved, to process a CHIPS order, a child in need of protection services order for the family, and that could be ordering services in the home as well as out-of-home placements, with the ultimate goal of getting kids to permanence if we do need to place kids out of home. So that's really the broad picture of what we're required to do as a mandate by the state. As Lance has said a couple of times today, this isn't a choice the county has, this is what's mandated by law. It is a funding partnership with the Department of Children and Families and county levy. There's federal funds that pool down to the state that are passed through to us. But at the end of the day, again, it is a funding partnership. Services cannot be denied because of lack of funding. And that was a question that was asked previously. If we don't have the money in our budget and still need to place a child who is unsafe, what do? We place the child because we're required to do that. And obviously it's in the best interest of the community as well and the county board in terms of liability. But we would never not deliver services because it was a budget implication. So I really wanted to emphasize that as well. Many of our reports, our child maltreatment reports, come from professional people who it is within their purview to see children, and they are required to report when they see a concern that a child is unsafe, meaning alleged to be abused or neglected. And those include teachers, medical personnel, law enforcement, and therapists, among others. Our primary reporters are law enforcement and teachers. We also have people in the community, neighbors, family members, et cetera, who will report concerns to us. Those are voluntary reporters. Anybody can report a concern. The types of abuse and neglect are listed here, and Christy's going to go into more detail with the statute so you're understanding what type of child maltreatment we're talking about. But to give you a picture of the scope, in 2021, we had 1,592 calls or reports to us for child maltreatment in Marathon County. Out of those, 516 were screened in, meaning that they met the statutory definition of child abuse or neglect if what the reporter was saying was accurate, which means we have jurisdiction and we have an obligation then to investigate or do an assessment. So 516 cases in 2021. And so I'm going to turn it over to Christy.
All right, thank you. Vicki, I'm Christy Keel, just to give you a little bit picture. I am currently the chair of the Department of Social Services Board. I believe I've been on the board for 4 years and the chair for just coming up on 2 years. In practice, for 15 years, I did practice as an attorney as a guardian ad litem representing children in foster care. So I have the experience as well. In the last 5 years, I've been doing something else, but that was my past experience, just to give you some understanding there. So when we look at the requirements under the Children's Code, which really is, federal policy that's codified in the state that then tells the counties really how to handle that. There's 3 areas of abuse. There's the physical abuse under state statute 4813. Physical injury inflicted on the child by anything other than accidental means. That physical injury could include, but not limited to, lacerations, burns, broken bones, internal injuries, severe bruising, and great bodily harm. And this also includes, under this subsection, abuse to an unborn child. So that would be a situation of drug use or alcohol abuse that's extreme to a certain extent, that's then proven that it's damaging that child, and that child can come under care and protection. So when we're looking at these statutes, the corporation, once something was screened in, it would then go to Corporation Counsel. They would file a petition, CHIPS petition, and that would go before the court. These are the statutes. These are the children that would then come under care and protection. And then we have sexual abuse, which is under 48.02, and that would be sexual contact or intercourse. This statute also has sexual exploitation or child pornography, forced viewing or listening to sexual activity, prostitution, or which is trafficking and things of that nature, and exposure of the genitals to a child or causing the child to do the same thing. So that would be under this statute as well. That may be another allegation. And finally, neglect, which I want to say that's a lot of cases in Marathon County, or at least my experience was a lot of cases come under neglect, which is 48.13. So whose parent, guardian, or legal custodian neglects, refuses, or is unable to, for reasons other than they're overtly to provide necessary care, food, clothing, medical, dental, shelter for the child. So oftentimes, especially in these cases, that might be due to substance abuse or something, and then losing a house, or there being drug paraphernalia in a house, or it being deemed unsafe within the house. That oftentimes is a lot of what we're seeing, what I saw in Marathon County. So this would have to come to the level, though, of seriously endangering the physical health, and would put them at substantial risk of being harmed or injured in that placement. So again, I think one of the hardest things that, like Lance was pointing out earlier, is, it may be a different standard of your home cleanliness, but it has to come to that serious harm or injury to the child. That neglect has to come to. It wouldn't just be a dirty house that isn't to your cleanliness. So it'd be to a certain specific standard. Sound good?
Switching in. All right. We're kind of tag teaming here. So what our mandated response includes is screening in or out the child maltreatment reports, as I referenced, and that's basically the supervisor making a determination if we have jurisdiction based on the content of the report. And then we're required to respond to those child maltreatment reports based on the level of danger. So the ones that are an immediate need are same day, we're going out that day, often with law enforcement on those because those are the most serious and time-sensitive concerns. Something the reporter is saying something is happening right now to a child. And then we also have a 2-day and a 5-day response that is more around like an imminent risk. There's a situation that is dangerous to the child, such as there is a person that the child is alleging has maltreated them, but they aren't having contact with that child for a week, for example. And so the parent is protective and we can delay doing that investigation to be able to prioritize the other one. So it really depends on the nature of what's being reported on when we need to respond. In all cases, we need to make a determination on whether or not the evidence that we find is showing that the incident occurred, so that the child was indeed abused or neglected. And if we find that, we would be substantiating that, meaning, again, there's a preponderance of the evidence that suggests that this event occurred to make the child be unsafe. And as Christy said, many of those cases then may move on to the children's court and have jurisdiction under the children's court for some type of safety plan, court-ordered type situation. So we're required, when we determine a child to be unsafe, to take action. That is our requirement to ensure safety. Our federal and state laws say in every case we must make an attempt to rectify the situation if a child's unsafe in their own home first. So we have various ways that we do that to try to support a parent, or if one parent is the person who's of a concern, have that parent leave if the other parent can protect the child, for example. When that can't occur in a way that our trained social workers believe could be assuring on a proper level of safety, then the child may be removed from the home. In those cases, we always look at placing with relatives first and then out-of-home care. In all of those cases, once a child is removed from home, we need to immediately start to talk about how we're going to get that child back. So that's a requirement. How are we going to try to get that child back with the parent first, or to other means of permanence if it doesn't work with the parent eventually. So the different types of placements that we do utilize are, as I said, relative care, foster home, which we reported on last time, group home care, which is a level above that, where there's shift staff home that are taking care of kids, and then residential treatment, which is the most expensive and the most structured kind of care, where children are receiving therapy services and intensive treatment to be able to get back to the community and hopefully to their parents. To give you an idea of the scope of the amount of money this is in our budget and for the county, in 2022, our out-of-home care budget was in excess of $5.3 million. So out-of-home care is expensive, and the higher up you go in terms of the level of structure, the more expensive it gets. I didn't include in here Lincoln Hills, but Lincoln Hills would be included in here as our correctional setting for juveniles that require that level and that the court orders. So how does it get paid for? Well, it is a partnership between state and federal dollars and county levy, as we had mentioned before. And right now, our blend is about 60% state federal and 40% levy. And that's better than it was years ago. Prior to 2018, it was closer to 50-50. And even before that, the county actually put in more of a percentage. So our funding partnership with the Department of Children and Families has worked to our benefit in the last several years, where we've received additional dollars, which is nice. But the county still has a large stake financially in paying for child welfare services. How we are going to receive funding has changed, and that was with the passage of Family First Prevention Services Act that was passed in a bipartisan budget back in 2018. What this means is that there's going to be less funding for child welfare agencies to pay for out-of-home care placement. There is no new money that is being attached to this act. It's basically reinvesting the same amount of money through the Social Security Act that had previously been used to pay states, in essence, to provide child welfare on behalf of the federal government, looking at the number of kids in out-of-home care placement. And instead of that, they're shifting some of that money to early intervention or prevention, which actually was some of the things you talked about in terms of parenting services early. So what this means is that child welfare agencies have to find a new way of providing services to keep kids with their families, because financially, this is a financial incentive or disincentive, however you look at it, to be able to keep kids with their families, because we'll have less money overall to pay for out-of-home care placement. So again, the system change is already underway. We're already into it in Wisconsin, figuring out how we're going to do this, both locally with the Department of Social Services and then with the Department of Children and Families in Madison. There are a number of long-term projects that are underway, both with us locally as well as the state, and some short-term ones, one-time opportunities. And this brings us to our presentation on Family Keys, which is our opportunity right now that we have to get more prepared to be able to be successful with keeping more kids at home with their families. So basically, we are part of a demonstration project with La Crosse and Wood counties, along with the Department of Children and Families and some other partners that have come to the table to be able to address the shortage of affordable, safe housing for child welfare families. And about 10% of children are removed statewide from their homes due to unsafe and inadequate housing. And a number of children, and I don't have specific data on that, but we know we have a number of families right now in Marathon County who could have their children back. They've done what they need to do for the court-ordered conditions. They've gotten the treatment they needed to get. They are stable. They could have their children back. They don't have a safe or affordable place to live with their children, so their children are remaining in care. That would be what this project would be addressing. So our vision of success would be that adequate and safe housing is available to all families, so the lack of such is never a barrier to parents being able to take care of their children. The project is collaborative, again, with the Department of Children and Families. It's a learning experience. It is a learning collaborative, a demonstration project, if you will, that is going to result in a proof of concept. So all 3 counties will be embarking on different projects to see what works best and what kind of location for the state to learn from and then share with other child welfare agencies across the state, again, to be able to maximize on that learning. The key piece here is this is the intersection of child welfare and housing, meaning that the grant that we are talking about today is only for child welfare families and only for the purpose of housing. So these are our team members that we talked about. Casey Family Foundations is a national foundation that is providing support for the overall project. And then, as I mentioned, the Department of Children and Families on our county teams, and Root is the one who's doing the project design. So we have a long-term and short-term opportunity. Our long-term opportunity is basically working on this project with the other counties and our partners up until 2025. Our short-term is basically looking at a project that we wrote for, which is, I wrote short-term, but it's not necessarily short-term what we submitted, but it was more an immediate. So the question posed to us was, what would it give you an immediate relief for child welfare families if you had a project that would work for you right now? So our project specifically is for transitional housing for child welfare families in the amount of $327,000. It would be a 2-year grant. A lot of it is upfront, one-time money to buy furniture and that type of thing to get it set up. But then a large portion is it for rent, for a congregate setting that has numerous bedrooms where people would have individual bedrooms that would lock, and then they share a living space. And the people that would live there would be families that are already working with us, they're already on our caseloads, and we have been able to determine that they have the ability to safely parent their children with some supports for us. And so once families have that kind of out of the way, I don't have to worry about housing, right? I can be have stability for housing. Now I can work on some of the other things that are a barrier for me to get long-term housing. We would have a case management position that we would likely contract for that would help them to locate more permanent housing, and that would be looking at the barriers that they potentially would have to that, which could be education, it could be a good rental history. So actually living in the transitional housing would give them an opportunity to experience successful tenancy, which would help them to be able to be more successful in being accepted for a rental history or rental availability. We have situations right now where even though we have some funds available where we could help pay the rent for families for a couple of months instead of paying for foster care, our families can't locate affordable housing that they would be able to continue past then. We had a situation recently where a family did have an apartment that the landlord said they were able to rent, and by the time they got across town to give them the check for the apartment, he rented it to someone else who had a more reliable history. So it is an extreme difficulty for us at this point. The target date for the grant is August of 2022, and again, it would run potentially for 2 years for us. The other piece that I want to emphasize here before turning it back to Christy is that when we look at a cost savings, like what is in it for the county if you're going to talk about money? Right now, we have 105 kids that are in foster care. The average cost of foster home is $566 a month. And we're looking at when this congregate living is full, we could take up to 8 kids at a time. And so if we look at that annually, that would be a savings just looking at the foster care rate of $54,336 just for the foster care rate, not including any of the other related costs that occur with out-of-home care and our partner costs, for example, corporation counsel, working with court petitions and court time, that kind of thing. So again, it saves money as well. So with that, I'm going to turn that over again back to Christy.
So as Vicki spoke a little bit, are there any other slides or is it just me? Okay, thanks. As Vicki said in the beginning, you know, under the statutes, we are required, the court, Department of Social Services, the guardian ad litem always has to give recommendations in terms of the best interests of the child. And so it's really important to remember that the goal is if a child is to remain at home with prevention or services. They've deemed this whole Family First Prevention Act came out of an idea of how traumatic it is for a child to be removed from a home. You know, their connection to that bio parent is really, no matter what, one of the strongest connections they have. Obviously, there's some circumstances where that can't be avoided, but it's most important for them to remain in their homes and or placed with them as soon as possible. And when it comes to the point of where you're ready, where the parent has successfully done all of these things, because the list is long, it's really pretty difficult to accomplish all of it in the time frame that we give them. You know, when the one remaining thing, especially in a housing crisis, is housing, this program is like a no-brainer. It's awesome to be able to then place that child back with the parents, with the support of the case management and all of the things that will be in that placement. Additionally, because of the Family First Prevention Services Act, you heard that a lot of the funding is changing. So not only do we have to create new ways of finding funding while a child, so what I mean by that is that if they're placed in out-of-home care, there'll be less funding coming from the federal government because the incentive is to do more at home, more prevention, more of the stuff prior to placement or by reunifying the children. And so the county is going to be increasing that amount and paying that amount anyway. So this is really a great opportunity for not only us to take federal funds, grant funds, federal funds and foundation dollars through the state and to actually see if the project works, see if this helps reduce that money that we would otherwise be obligated to pay. So it's kind of a really, I think the program and the fact that we were one of 3 counties in the state speaks volumes as to how we could make a difference in this and to see how this really works in our county. and see how it helps us in the long run. So that's.
There really was one more slide I realized.
Oh,
It's
was
just our
there?
partners.
Okay.
You can just go forward.
Oh, yeah.
It's just our partners.
So you can see here the various, and this has been really awesome to see the people come forward in our county that are very supportive of the project and are already on the team, and how fast this happened. You know, Brian Gumness, he does great things with Greenhawk Foundation and really sees, and you know, through the Community Partners Campus, really sees this as being something that can make an impact. Ben Lee over at United Way, Laura Scuderi from the Health Department, Diane Senholz from North Central Healthcare, and then you can see the wealth of individuals at Social Services that are all on the team. And then also, there's already been some great county partners that have come forward, from a landlord who's willing to provide the home, St. Vincent de Paul's with furniture and other needs, at City of Wausau and Police Department. So it's really already a great opportunity that's coming forward. So I would strongly urge the county board and the Health and Human Services to move forward this in allowing the grant funding to come.
Thank you. And Administrator Leonard, did you want to add anything?
Sure, just context, it is on your agenda for, as great segue, Christy, in the event you as a committee want to take a position with respect to the acceptance of the grant funding, you are agendized to allow you to do that. It's not required under your rules. Your rules require budget amendments to go begin with HR, Finance, and Property, but wanted to make sure you had that option. Just to piggyback on a couple of things, I think this is a great example of how, you know, you just wrapped up your conversation, you postponed your conversation until next time about your strategic plan, but you look at what I think, and I can't emphasize this enough, the value of these planning documents and how they guide staff. If you look at outcome number 2 for 3.3, we specifically, the board specifically picked out-of-home care days for the reasons Vicki mentioned with Family First Preventative Services Act, saying, hey, your funding is changing. We all know, as Christy said, we want to be more trauma-informed, which is your strategies A and B in that same objective. It's more trauma-informed to work to keep children in the home. All these things align. In your last budget, the county board approved 2 social services specialists, parent aides, to, as Supervisor Niemeyer and Cavelli referenced, how do we help people parent? We're not going to send parent aides into everybody's house in Marathon County. We are mandated to work with certain parents and certain families. Like Vicki said, you know, we get well over 1,500 calls where people think, geez, this kid is being abused or neglected or is otherwise in need of care. That shows you that there's this need, but even then, you see where are we permitted to go? We are permitted to go to 512 to follow up. That's not, hey, we started 512 new cases. That's 512 cases were screened in for further investigation where we can make resources available. So you funded parent aides in your last budget to do things like deal with issues that parents have, cleaning a house. I had the great pleasure of serving in Corporation Counsel's office and prosecuting these cases, children in need of protection or services. And there are a lot of things that a lot of parents need help, quite honestly, that you or I take for granted that we know how to do because our experience in life was such that we saw that behavior. It was modeled by our parents, our grandparents. A lot of parents don't have that. So parent aides are important. The other thing we see often is why this sort of program is important, because we allow social workers to get in and work with the families to address underlying mental health issues, underlying substance abuse issues, underlying trauma. You know, all these things play into the work that we do, and I think, you know, I can't sum up enough on the financial side. As your administrator, I'm the guy that guards the checkbook. I'm not going to say no-brainer, but I can't come up with a better word off the top of my head. I don't see any significant financial risk to the county with this program, at least for 2 years. I can tell you for 2 years, this is the first pilot program that I've seen from the state of Wisconsin where we apply for a grant and they are fully funding the thing. Normally, you read for those of you that have applied for grants, you see, what's the local match? What are you putting into the game? This doesn't have that. Apart from just the general stuff we all do already when we do new programs and new services with oversight time, but it's agendized for you to take action. Should you choose to do it, like I said, you don't have to. The one thing I would say, at least for 2 years, I see this saving county tax levy for the taxpayers of Marathon County. If at the end of 2 years, my hope is that we know what the real benefit would be for Marathon County if we want to move forward with this program, absent any state funding, and the state will learn how much funding perhaps they want to earmark toward these sort of programs. So from those perspectives, I think it merits strong consideration. Quite honestly, I've not seen a grant like this before. Happy to answer any questions you may have about it, however.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I think, everything that Administrator Leonard has said is just right on the head, and it also moves into that conversation we were having about affordable housing, about Objective 4.1. It kind of segues into that as well, so I think that's really great that it ties the two together. Are there any questions from the committee? Supervisor Covelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've had some conversations with some Marathon County residents in the past couple of days about this program, and they had a lot of questions. So I know this is a new program. We're implementing it, trying to implement it pretty quickly here. But when you do that, a lot of questions arise. One question was the players, who's all involved, and I know you have them listed here. One of them, the Casey Family Programs. Who is that, and where are they from? Can you explain a little bit of that?
It's the Annie E. Casey Foundation. I think they're out of Colorado, yep. And they do work across the country with child welfare agencies, different states. And basically what they're all about is innovative practices to improve child welfare in a trauma-informed approach as well, but just to improve the nature of child welfare. It's what their mission is. So again, they're at the table in terms of supporting the project itself. The funding of the grant is purely federal dollars, one-time federal dollars that were given to the state to prepare for Families First.
If I can add one thing before your next question, I think it's really important. When people ask questions like that, the thing that always goes to my head, are we losing local control? And the answer, absolutely not. Vicki alluded to this in the presentation. We make placement decisions irrespective of money. It's about children and families, and that doesn't change with this. The fact that housing is available doesn't change in any way the way that social services and social workers make determinations as to whether or not a child is safe with their parent. That determination will be made. The question is, do they have a safe place in which to live? And this checks that box. But I think to I just want to make very clear, we don't lose local control in any form or fashion.
My next question is, did we develop the program here locally in Marathon County, or did the state help develop that, or did somebody else develop that?
So for the actual grant that we're talking about for the transitional housing, that was something that we developed the plan internally with our partners that are on the slide here in terms of what is needed to be able to serve families right now, because that was the goal of the first part of the grant. The project is longer term. We're going to have another option to do something else longer term. But the first question is, what would help families right now, child welfare families right now in Marathon County? And the partners that you see on the screen are the ones that came up with this idea and concept that we think will be successful.
Okay, and one final question is, 2 years down the road, we're looking at one house right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Possibly 3 families living there.
Yes.
So down the road, where do you see this leading? Is it going to be more houses? Is it going to be more families? What do you think?
We really don't know. That's why it's a demonstration project. We're going to see what we can learn from it. As I mentioned at the county board meeting previously, we will not be, requesting additional levy for this program. If we demonstrate that we can save out-of-home care dollars, and we know, I gave you the figure that we're going to save over $50,000 a year as we're projecting. If we can save out-of-home care dollars and repurpose those and serve more families in the community, that's absolutely what we want to do, because that's going to match our funding sources. Right? So it's going to depend on what we learn and whether or not it's successful. And then we have an opportunity again to do a different project as the 3-year project goes on. We'll be able to submit something else. So we could tweak this potentially. We have 2 other counties who are doing something completely different that we could learn from, and we might want to do something like they're doing. So this is a very exciting project. It's like a kind of, again, a project designed as it's going. We've never really been part of something like this before. So my answer is, I don't know, but we're going to find what's successful, and then we'll continue to make it work.
Thank you.
Supervisor Arstead?
You mentioned that there's a list to vet out these people that would be into this, the homes. Can you share with us what that list is that you're looking at?
I'm sorry, list of people that what?
I think maybe that goes to the idea that someone would only be placed in this home if they had accomplished all of their court order. I think she's wondering how would they be
Yes,
identified to do it?
Right.
Yeah.
So in families, if the children's court determines they have jurisdiction and there is a court order that the family must comply with, whether it's in-home or out-of-home, but for this case, we'll say out-of-home care, the parents must do certain conditions in order to have their children returned. And so what we're talking about is this would be the families that have accomplished everything else of the court orders, but having safe housing, it might be something they were not able to accomplish on their own, and we would help them with that final stage. So they would have done everything else that we identified they needed to do in order to prove that they're safe for their children. Is that helpful?
I have another question. What about watching over these people in this? I mean, is there somebody that's going to check on them? How does that all work?
Yes, we will have a daily presence in the apartment unit. Daily present every day. Is that twice? I don't know. No, we will be there daily, our department, and if not more than daily, because all of these families will have social workers who are working with them, but we'll have designated staff that will be their responsibility to check in and see how things are going, what families might need, et cetera. And then we also have service providers that will be working with these families, that some will be providing services in the home, that will be also safety checks on how everything is going. And then the third piece we have is a case management position that I mentioned we would contract out for, that person would be spending a lot of time at that home providing case management to those families. So it'd be a multi-level.
Thank you.
Right, are there any other questions? Supervisor Niemeyer?
Hey, I was just wondering, is there a maybe a document that we can see on like the methods of mentoring that are used for helping these families work through these kinds of issues? Like what sort of mentoring methods are used in general? Yeah.
I don't know that we have a document per se, and when you talk about mentoring as a service, that's a really good question or a really good comment, because the case management position that we're looking at contracting for, we hope that is somebody who acts as a mentor for these people, and specifically could it be somebody who was in the child welfare system and graduated, so to speak, right? That they have improved their life and their situation, learned from it, and could help other families. That's always what we see as most successful.
If I might add, just based on some of the other programs we've heard from social services and kind of the services that they provide, some things that you, I think, maybe are looking for would be like helping somebody take a look at their debt and how to pay off debt, how to gain job skills, interview skills, if they have fines, money that's outstanding to municipalities, how are they going to pay that off? Things like that to help them get back on track are services that they provide. If you're looking at like you kind of mentoring to get your life back on track so you can get your family back together, things like that.
If I may, Madam Chair, just to add the importance about court-ordered conditions. It's really important. There's a general, body of those from which judges kind of pick and choose, but they're specialized, individualized for the family's needs. the parents' needs. So to your question, Supervisor Niemeyer, no two social services CHIPS cases are the same. So then when you talk about what mentoring is provided, it's sitting down and the social worker gets to meet with the family, starts to address understand what their needs are. They engage parent aides because like I said, you might have parents who don't understand something as simple, when Christy brought up, keeping your house in a safe and clean manner. They don't understand what that is and how one would do that. Preparing food for children, there are all sorts of things throughout, kind of across that spectrum, we're helping them to address. And the court, in addition to the case management that the social worker is providing, the court has regular ongoing oversight during that case. Certainly when it's an out-of-home placement, they're frequently checking in. But even when that case is transitioned to, hey, the child has been returned to the home of a parent, the court doesn't go away. They stay for a period of time based on how long the court deems it appropriate to oversee that case to make sure things are going appropriately. I can tell you I did speak with one of the judges for Marathon County. They're excited about the program because, we didn't really talk about ancillary benefits, but the benefit on the court side is you do return those children to the home, and then you keep that case open for as long as necessary, but then you can close it. And that's, our court system, you've heard from District Attorney Whetstone and our judges and our clerk of court, we do have a backlog of all sorts of cases as a result of the pandemic. So anything we can do to allow court cases to come to conclusion in a safe and appropriate way, I think is a good thing. But I just wanted to add in, again, those are very specific. And what might work for one or might be a need in one case is not necessarily a need in another.
And I think it's important to note that I have never been on, when he was talking about the judges put that stuff in place, I've never been on one case where parenting skills isn't one requirement of the court order. They're always required. So it can be either a class through, and that's where the case manager would come in and determine what's best. Is it going to be one-on-one parent aid in the home that comes there for certain hours to help mentor them through that and help them learn those parenting skills? Or is it going to be in a classroom setting where they're learning off of other people? So every single case I've ever had, that's one of the requirements they have to do.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Supervisor Arstead?
What would be the timeline that you're looking at to help these families out? Is there a certain?
We want to be flexible with the timeline based on the family's need. However, as Administrator Leonard said, in general, our court orders will continue for about a year after children are reunited with their parents. Sometimes the order could be extended, but in general, a year is a good rule of thumb. And so we want to get them to their next place that they're going to live and see some stability there. So if you look at that kind of reverse planning, we're thinking most families would be there 3 to 9 months kind of thing, depending on what their needs are for them to be able to get established in a more permanent setting before we close our case.
Go ahead.
Sorry. And at this point, you're only looking at 3 families to help at this point?
Well, the physical space we have, we think will accommodate 3 to 4 families, depending on how many children each family has. So we're making an estimate of 8 children at a time, given the number of rooms that we have, but we don't know yet until we have more experience with that, but that's our initial projection.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Supervisor Covelli?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did have some questions from some of the residents in Marathon County about a project plan. Is there a project plan for this yet, or is that still in development? Or, for the concerns that they had is that we vote on something that it's already funded, is from what I understand. Is that correct?
We haven't received $1 and we haven't spent $1. The nature of the county board is by state law. If you want to amend the budget to add revenue, you need to do that by 2/3 vote. If the county board votes it down, we will go back to DCF and say, give your money to some other county. But no, we haven't spent any funds because they haven't been received.
Okay, so it has to go through committee to get to the full board to get in the budget, correct?
Your rules require HR Finance to look at a budget transfer, and the budget transfer moves from, if it's approved at HR Finance, would move to the county board for ultimate approval to be in accordance with state law as a new revenue, not budgeted for revenue.
Okay, thank you. I'm not against the program at all. I think it's a great program. What I'm concerned about, and what I've heard from the residents of Marathon County that I've spoken to, that have contacted me, is, you know, we haven't seen a plan, we haven't seen the project plan. We know the concept, we know, you know, what the goal is, but we haven't seen the plan. And I think that's where their concern is. I think you know, if they see the plan with details, you know, are we gonna put families that have addictions together? You know, that was one of the concerns. Are they, you know, and through experiences, and I've been a foster parent, through experiences, when you put families together with addictions, they don't get better. You know, they tend to stay in that same cycle. Even, you know, we know that they can walk through the program and pass a program and still be an addiction, you know, have an addiction. So, you know, that was one of the concerns from one of the residents. So, you know, I think the big concern that I have and others may have is the plan. What's the project plan, right?
Can I ask what does a project plan look like in your parlance? I mean, from my perspective, can we lay out how we envision that operating?
Correct.
Sure.
Yep.
So I think, what would that look like? I think in my mind, that's what we tried to do with the PowerPoint. So what additional information would address those questions you might have?
Well, I think like Supervisor Arstead said, is there going to be somebody on site full time? Is there going to be, you know, I know Vicki talked about at our last presentation about possibly having the other families care for each other's children. You know, that was a concern as well. So, you know, I think details like that people are concerned about.
Do you want to? I'll give the short answer, and Vicki will give a better one. It's not going to change in any way the way that we make decisions as to what activities by a parent is already permissible. It's just a different location. To your point about, can people with history of addiction live together, and that's a concern, and I can appreciate that from a practical question. They can do that now. You know, we place children, judges place children with people that have addiction histories all the time. The question is has the individual completed the requisite court conditions to such a degree that the child is no longer at a safety risk? So that thought process, the simplest way I can put it, that isn't going to change. Is there going to be someone on site 24/7? Again, my answer would be no. We don't do that now when we return a child to a home. You know very well, as a foster parent, what that looks like. We do check-ins. Quite honestly, this is going to be more supervision than we do in any other case that I can think of, other than keeping a child in foster care. So, you know, apart from those answers, I guess, if there's additional questions about, you know, we anticipate serving, like Vicki said, 3 to 4 families in this current location. We can bring back, I mean, if you'd like periodic reports, should the board approve the grant, we'd be happy to do that. I guess we've tried to provide as much as we can, so if there are certain specific other things you're looking for, please, I'm not trying to be obtuse, but be as direct as you can as to what you're looking for.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate one point that you made, is that we're already working with these families. They're already in the community, right? And if they had access to an affordable house, they would have their children back, and we would be doing, again, spot checks. They're actually going to get a lot more support and supervision in this type of setting. And it really will be for people who've already demonstrated that they've made the changes they need to make in order to get their children back. So I think that's the salient point here. And again, if they had adequate housing, they wouldn't need to rely on this, but they don't. So we're helping with that last court-ordered condition, which is basically to be able to have safe and stable housing to have their children back.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Supervisor Baker? Oh, you'll have to turn that on.
Thank you, Chair Van Cray. So I have 4 different items that may be reasons that the committee might want to vote against it. But before I say that, I thank you for your work, and I don't take my reasons as diminishment of what you're doing, because it's very important. I know what you're doing. It's very important. So I have a couple points, and then 4 points, and then 2 questions. So the first point I have is that affordable housing has not been adopted in our strategic plan yet. It's being promoted heavily on the county board, but we have not adopted that as a strategic plan. Wausau, on the other hand, has been working for 6 months on affordable housing. And they have a task force, which according to their website is a regional task force, Affordable Housing Regional Task Force. 7 members appointed by the mayor, and 3 of those members are either advocates for affordable housing or represent municipalities, government entities outside of the city of Wausau. No one on that list appears to represent anyone other than the city of Wausau. All the addresses have no city, so it looks like they're all from Wausau, and they're not listed as representing anyone else. So I think this is a Wausau-driven agenda, not a Marathon County agenda. I don't know, you can enlighten me, whether Marathon County has actually been involved with affordable housing in the past. I know Wausau has a affordable housing or housing authority. So when I've talked to probably 20 people, constituents, over the last 2 weeks on this, and this Wausau agenda is number 4 on my list. It's not the top priority for me, why I don't support this. But for many of my constituents, it is the top priority. They say, why is the county getting involved in something that's rightly in the role of Wausau? The second one is, and you can be skeptical on this, but when we joined the board, we took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And I took an oath to uphold this Constitution, not the Constitution that we have been interpreted to. The 10th Amendment says that all powers not delegated to the states, not delegated to the United States, are prohibited. And there is nothing in the Constitution about the federal government being involved with local housing. Many of you might know that I spent quite a bit of time Convention of States trying to get an Article 5 amendment passed that would change the Constitution to limit federal overreach. And some of you on this board have pushed back and said, we shouldn't be changing our Constitution, we should live with the Constitution we have. Well, the Constitution that we have says federal government should not be involved with federal housing. We can't do much about that, but we can turn this money down because it's federal money. They should not be involved with this. You say there's no strings attached, but I don't believe that to be the case. The third thing is, one of the first occasions that I had on the board, someone came up to me, a supervisor, and said, have you had the McDonald's Federal Burger? They actually called it something else, but I'm trying to be nonpartisan. And I said, McDonald's Federal Burger, what is that? Well, you order anything you want, and then the next person behind you in line pays for it. So, if you take somebody who's in need and take them to the drive-thru and buy them food, that's very charitable, that's very kind. And the equivalent to that is making a personal donation to the Hager House or Gospel TLC or volunteering for the Hager House, if you take someone through the drive-through line and say, here's a meal, and the next 3 people behind you have to pay for it, that's not kindness or charity, that's something else. And that's the analogy to this program. We're not voting on us helping these people, we're voting on taking taxpayer dollars. This is taxpayer subsidized housing. It's not affordable housing, it's taxpayer subsidized housing. And that's not the same as kindness or charity. That's something different. The fourth thing that I want to say, which is the most important thing to me, is, to me, this program really scares me. I think this is a Trojan horse. And I say that because we're being presented with, we want to save kids. We want to keep kids with their parents. Who would be against that? No one. Conservative, liberal, whatever your viewpoint is, everyone is for keeping kids with their parents. And if you don't agree with that, what are you? Cruel, unjust, whatever. But what are the limits on this program? I mean, we're being asked to take taxpayer money. It's not our money, but it's taxpayer money. And we're going to spend it on a program that we have no limits on what can be done. It's a demonstration program. We're going to try to find out what works, what doesn't work. We're just going to, $300,000 to save $50,000 a year. So we're spending $300,000 of somebody else's money to save $100,000 of our money. That's why our country is in such dire straits, is because the federal government takes our money away, gives it back to us, and tells us how to use it. In this case, tells us to spend it however you want, I guess. And it's just, we have to stand up and say, no, we're not taking federal money. If we wouldn't spend our own money, if you want to do this, let's raise taxes and spend our own money and do it. Why are we taking someone else's money? So I have 2 questions. One is, what are the limits on this? What is the limits that's going to keep our government from growing in this program? And the second question is, if there are parents who are in our country illegally, but their children were born here, are they eligible for assistance under this program? Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
I appreciate the questions, and I think I'll start with, I'll try to just answer the questions, but affordable housing perhaps is, it's a term what we've used. Perhaps it has started a conversation that it wasn't intended to. This is really about access to housing that is safe and appropriate to return children to parents who have been deemed otherwise appropriate to have them. That said, that's my first answer to your question about that pertains to limits. The second one, your comments about what are the limits, and you referenced the Constitution, and I'm just going to focus on, again, what I started with statutory mandates. We have very specific statutory mandates within state law, and Vicky's department has expansive requirements under the administrative code. This program does not change those in any way. If we were unable to take an action under the administrative code before, this doesn't change that. So contrary to an idea that this somehow expands the limits in which we operate, I can tell you my perspective, my professional opinion is that it does not. It provides another tool in the toolbox available to social services to return children to parents who are already deemed otherwise safe and appropriate. Like Vicki said, if these parents had access to housing already, they would have their children returned to them. With respect to other limitations, your county board operating rules, I say this frequently, not only do we live in the realm of what is permitted by state statute, state law, all of us, I'm sure, sleep with an excerpt of Chapter 59 next to our bed. I know I do. we're bound by that. We're bound by the administrative code. I'm also bound, and all of your employees, all of my employees are bound by the administrative rules you put in place as a board. You have administrative rules put in place that there are no new positions unless you as a board approve them, and you have several ways to do that. You have, or I should say, you have a process that envisions several opportunities for debate on whether or not to do that. The first is that the request for a new position would come to your administrator, your sole employee, me. I would evaluate it based on the direction of the board, whether or not I thought it was appropriate to have that new position. If I did, it would then go to a standing committee, of which you are one, for consideration and a recommendation ultimately to HR Finance and Property. HR Finance and Property would then also review that new position request. If they approved it, it would then move to the full county board for approval. So no, there is a fundamental limit on new positions being created, new allocated positions being created through your board rules. With respect to this program generally, if at the end of 2 years, the board determines that you'd like to allocate funding to a program or not, you have the opportunity to do that through your annual budget. You are the policy board. You too operate within the limits of state law. Should you choose not to perform statutorily mandated work, there are ramifications of that as well. And or if the state determines that, and they have a process for doing so that the work isn't being done to the levels required by statutes. Social services, for example, in Milwaukee County is not Milwaukee County Department of Social Services. It is run by the state of Wisconsin Department of Children and Families, because that service was deemed inappropriate as it was previously being delivered. So we all, to your question, and if you have specific areas that you want to know what those limitations are, please let me know what they are, and if I don't know, I will look. But there are, in my mind, very significant limitations on the manner in which we deliver services, both at the state level and at the local level for local control. So I don't know, Vicki, was there anything else you wanted to add on that? And I apologize, Supervisor Baker, if there was anything else you were looking for in terms of costs. I think one of the challenges we have when we calculate cost is we don't load in overhead. And when we talk about, perhaps saving $50,000 of placement dollars, I think there's a lot of other things that the state, if I were running the state agency, I'd look at what's the return on investment, thinking about the cost of all of Vicki and her staff's time, the attorneys and corporation counsels and DA's offices around the state of Wisconsin, the funds that are paid to well-meaning lawyers like Christie and others that serve as guardian ad litems, and all the court costs that go with these cases. Having a case open for a period of time when it would otherwise close is quite simply very expensive. So I know that's probably not as descriptive as an answer as you would want, but it's the best I could come up with. I see you have a follow-up.
Two, actually. So one, this was presented following what is mandated of the county, and no one is suggesting that we don't do what is mandated. This is a program that's 3 counties, so obviously it is not mandated that we do this program because there's 69 counties that are not doing this program. Second, you didn't answer my question about the people who are here who are here illegally.
I think, Krista, can you grab a mic?
Sure, I can answer that. I'm Krista Jensen. I'm the Child Welfare Manager with Marathon County. So non-citizen parents is my understanding of your question. Would they be allowed to live in this home with their children if their children had been in out-of-home care? Is that correct?
If the children were born here, therefore the children have a right to be here, then are the parents eligible for funding under this program?
Yes, so our programs through social services do not discriminate on whether or not they're citizens or not, whether the parents are citizens or not. So if their children were in out-of-home care and they had accomplished all of their court-ordered conditions that had originally led them to their children being removed from their care, but the only thing that was left was a lack of affordable, stable, safe housing, then yes, those parents could be considered for this program as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vice Chair McEwen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to clear up so there's no confusion with this committee. We do not have an affordable housing objective in the strategic plan, but we do in the comp plan. 4.1, and I think I brought it up so people weren't trying to imagine where I got this one, but 4.1 reads promote a variety of safe and affordable housing options that meet the needs of all Marathon County members. There's 8 strategies that follow that. So we don't have it in the strategic plan. My personal opinion is it should be, and I presented this to this committee. So it is in the comprehensive plan, just so that this is cleared up with everyone. So thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Supervisor Leahy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a question that came up surrounding the comment about WASA driven versus Marathon County driven. First of all, WASA is a part of Marathon County. Just because, whatever, WASA is a part of Marathon County. But that does bring up a point. I mean, you're servicing families from all over the county. I would assume that this transitional housing could eventually mean that someone who lived in Merrill is now living there for some time, and they might want to get back to Merrill. I mean, could you talk a little bit about how that might work? Thank you.
Merrill's in Lincoln County. What? Merrill's
Damn
in
it,
Lincoln
whatever.
County.
I'm sorry, put in a... Okay, I thought
Okay,
so.
there's a
Okay.
piece of Merrill in Marathon County.
Sorry for the swear. Okay.
Okay, population-wise, most of the families we serve through Marathon County Social Services reside in the greater Wausau area, just population-wise, right? And so we only have the ability to start with one transitional housing unit. And so it seemed to make sense that it be in Wausau. But I appreciate you calling out, this is not a Wausau initiative. This is a Marathon County Child Welfare Initiative that the housing happens to be located in Wausau. And I appreciate County Administrator Leonard saying that maybe the buzzword is becoming affordable housing. Our families cannot afford housing, safe housing, in many cases to get their children back. That's what we're talking about. They've satisfied every condition except for that, and we're assisting them to be able to do that, to comply with our obligation to be able to provide as many services as possible. So that's really what we're talking about in terms of that. The only other comment I wanted to make around what are the limits, I wasn't sure if your question related to what are the limits of the grant. The limits of the grant are spelled out to be all of the costs related with that transitional housing, with the rent and the utilities and that type of thing, as well as a case management position that we are likely to contract out. That's the term. So it's not like the sky's the limit in terms of what the money can be used for. There was a paper that was approved by the Department of Children and Families that had those costs on it. And that is when you talk about limits, I wanted to include that as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Supervisor Niemeyer?
And this might be something that Lance, maybe you can answer. What would be qualified as a successful, like being able to meet those state statute mandates? How much does like the government have to have their hand in the dealings? So what if we're meeting these service mandates through a private institution or a nonprofit? Would that be a possibility that we have by showing proof of those institutions in our county, like being able to provide these services to people? Would that be able to meet the mandate of the state statute?
I don't know if I understand your question, but I'll referring back to Supervisor Baker's questions about mandates, absolutely correct. We are not mandated to deliver housing, make it available in this form or fashion. We are mandated, we are prohibited from returning children to an environment that is unsafe. And if they don't have safe housing, the way that we're doing this, we're solving this now, is where kids are not being returned home. So we can keep doing that. In terms of if a nonprofit made a housing unit available, certainly they could do that. I mean, if any nonprofits are watching this meeting and they're willing to make a rental unit, an apartment building available, I would love nothing more than to draft that MOU with Corporation Counsel to make that happen. They haven't done that as of yet. We do have a team working with the foundations that Vicki referenced, and they're on the screen, and a local landlord to try it out, to see if it works, quite honestly. And I think that's the whole point of the state, why the state is funding the program in the way that they're doing. If it doesn't have a return on investment, at least according to the state, I can't imagine them continuing the program in that form or fashion. Likewise, if they don't continue the program in that form or fashion, we do the internal calculation on what the ROI, we believe the ROI is. We bring it to the board, whether or not you can want to continue to deliver the service in this way. I hope that answers your question. If there's some nonprofit willing to engage with the county in a way that helps us cross off some of those court conditions, certainly we'd be willing to do that. We do partner some of the court conditions that exist. People do satisfy those through working with nonprofits. We're certainly working with non-governmental agencies. The vast majority of our court conditions we don't directly carry out. We ask them to work with a mental health counselor that is not a county employee. We ask them to get parent education, perhaps that's through some other agency. But I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And I would just add to that I think even if there was a nonprofit that came forward and wanted to do this, that there would still be room for 3 or 4 families to be in a program like this. I don't envision that this is a small problem. I think the housing issue within the county on this topic is widespread. So I do think that's.
Go ahead, Supervisor Covelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A follow-up to the, I believe you said it was 105 children in the system right now?
In foster care.
In foster care. So out of that 105, how many cannot go back to their homes because of the housing situation?
Immediately at this point, it's under 5, right? Immediately at this point, but families are moving through the system over time, right? So by next month, other families may have met their return conditions and that number changes. But right now, that's why we knew it was immediate need for several families.
Okay, thank you. And is it because the house isn't habitable for the kids, or is there some other reason?
It could be, yes, it could be a physical environment, safety issue, that it's not habitable. It could also be that the parents do not have the ability to be able to live on their own for a variety of reasons, and they're living with other people that are deemed to be unsafe, maybe because of a criminal background that is not safe for children, maybe because of drug use that the other people would be using, and that's why we don't have the ability to return those children home to that type of environment.
Okay, thank you. I was just, in my mind, I was thinking, maybe these families are homeless and living someplace that,
That could be
is
the
not a
case.
house or living quarters.
Well, that could be the case as well. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Supervisor Baker.
If the accurate number is 5 families or 5 children, could we remove the 10% from the, in the PowerPoint, it says 10% of all children are removed from their homes. I brought this up at the meeting as well. That's 3,100 children in Marathon County. 5 is a lot less than 3,100. That's been in the paper. That's been in the news, duplicated out of your PowerPoint, that there's 10% of kids are taken away from their parents because of housing. So please take that out of the PowerPoint.
And we certainly could rephrase that or take that out. What it really is referencing is statewide. 10% of the children placed in foster care, it's because of a lack of housing. It doesn't mean 10% of all children are placed.
It clearly does not say that in the PowerPoint. It clearly says something different than that in the PowerPoint. And like I say, that was interpreted by the media. If you go back and read Wausau Pilot Review, it clearly says that 10% of children are taken out of their homes because of housing.
Thank you.
So you're making the problem to seem much, much larger than it is. And I brought that point up at the board meeting, and it's been distributed today. It's been distributed to the news media. We talk about misinformation. This is misinformation. I would ask that you correct it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that again, as you did at the previous meeting, Vicki. I would just like to point out that obviously we want to keep kids out of home care, but it's not just that we want to do this. It's that, like they've explained, we have to do this because the state is going to stop providing less and less funding for us to place children out of care. And like Vicki said, what happens if we don't have money for placement? Too bad, we still have to provide placement. So I don't know what that looks like if we don't have money to provide placement, but I assume that would look like layoffs. Would it look like borrowing from contingency funds? How do we provide that placement? Because we have an obligation to do so. So if we don't have funding to provide placement, what happens?
So I will say, in Marathon County, we do a very good job of budgeting appropriately. We budget the placements we believe we are going to utilize. We don't put a number on paper that you're gonna like and then come to you and ask you in the middle of the year to take an extra $250,000 or $500,000 out of contingency to fund a placement at Lincoln Hills. We believe we have the appropriate number of placements based on our historical need within the budget. That said, should we have an increased, for whatever reason, an increased need to utilize higher placements that come at higher costs, we would need to fund that. And the way we would do that is by asking for, we could fund that through a contingency transfer in the middle of the year, or we could fund that as the board did in a previous budget with respect to costs associated with the drug epidemic. You funded that from a reserve, from your reserve. You essentially took your operating reserve and utilized that to fund that budget gap. I strive very hard not to do that because your reserve is there for things that a reserve is there for, potential economic downturn, significant unforeseen expenses. We budget appropriately, but to your point, yes, we are required to fund those placements. And essentially we would, if you ask me how we would do that moving forward, if our placement costs increase significantly, what the budget strategy we would likely utilize, because we can't, as the comment was made before, raise taxes to fund this sort of work. We actually can't do that. You're prohibited from raising operating levy. This is an operating expense. What we would do is we would take expenses that we currently fund with operating levy, move them to borrowing, and shift the expense associated with servicing that debt onto debt service, which is above and outside of your operating levy limit under Wisconsin law. So you would convert things that right now you're not paying interest on to an interest-bearing borrowing, and then you would service that through a debt levy.
Thank you. So it sounds complicated, and it sounds like something we don't want to be doing. So if we are not a proactive organization in how we are going to keep kids out of home care, these could be the realities that we come up against as a body. This is a great opportunity. There is no local match for this. If we decline this grant, another county is going to get it, and another county is working towards being the healthiest, safest, most prosperous county in the state, which is what we want to be. I believe that this item will be going to the HR Finance Committee per our county board rules. That has to, is that correct, Administrator?
Yes, pursuant to your board rules, any budget transfer actually is taken to HR Finance and Property. I agendized it in the event you wished to take action. You're certainly not obligated to do that, but as this is underneath your purview by your board's operating rules, that's the reason we agendized it this way.
Thank you. I don't believe action by this body is needed today since it will be going to the HR and Finance Committee, and I want to thank you two for coming and presenting to us. It was very informative, and I look forward to the project and seeing how it goes. Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, and resolution. There are none. Item number 7, educational presentations and committee discussion. 7A, an update on Marathon County's participation in Project GROW Child Care Grant Program through State of Wisconsin Department of Children and Families.
We'll be very brief. Appreciate your attention. Happy to answer any questions. But as is in the administrator's work plan, one of the things that the board directed and sorry, microphone was off. One of the things that the board directed administration to move forward with was applying for a grant through the Department of Children and Families for the Project GROW Child Care Grant through DCF. As I referenced at a previous meeting, we were successful in receiving that grant, so I just wanted to give you a very brief update as to the work that has been done to this point. To this point, we have had a stakeholder meeting with grant participants. The first stakeholder meeting was held at the end of June. So we have participants from, bear with me for just a second here. We have participants from DC Everest, the City of Wausau School District, Child Caring, which is our local organization that is a referral and resource organization for individuals and providers of child care. We have child care providers. North Central Technical College is a participant. The City of Wausau, Marathon County was the lead applicant. I believe we have approximately 15 entities that have applied for that grant. And we're successful in receiving that as the lead agency. Chair Van Cray actually is the board's representative on that strategic planning group. But again, the grant itself is just that, strategic planning. So we are receiving assistance from First Children's Finance, which is a national organization that assists in addressing child care shortages within communities. The first meeting was really to provide us some important data pieces for Marathon County, but also statewide, and give us some insight on kind of what are some of the market forces that are interacting with families as they seek to meet the need that they have for childcare. It might be surprising to you to know that according to the calculations that they have done, we have in excess of 4,000 slots of need in Marathon County in terms of childcare, based on the various census data that First Children's Finance pulls their data from. And they actually have an interactive site on the Wisconsin Department of Children and Families. They call it their sandbox, and you can select any county within the state, and you can see here that I've selected Marathon, and you can see that 50% of our zip codes within the county are considered child care deserts, and that term is defined within the site, so you can see that. You'll also see the affordability piece, what people are, and I use that affordability in terms of affordability is different for every one of us, but affordability information is provided on the site as well. You'll see the median income in Marathon County of just in excess of $63,000, and that the average child care price based on age is set forth by month. And average total price here on the side, you'll see that if you have a child that's under the age of 1, generally speaking, you are paying 3 times the affordable ratio on childcare, the affordable ratio of your income to childcare expense. So a lot of very helpful information within this sandbox site. But the important thing that we started doing at the end of that meeting was we really started to brainstorm based on the conversation we had with, as a group, what were the barriers that we saw within the child care space. And I can say with all confidence, I frequently talk about, if you were a private business, you wouldn't get into running government because, on a really good day, we lose less money than we lost the day before. Running a jail isn't a moneymaker. No offense, Vicki, but social services isn't bringing in revenue. The vast majority of our operations, Kim, you likewise are in that same bucket of not bringing in money. That's what we do. We are government. Our goal is to run our operations, our mandated services in the most efficient and effective way possible. But we deliver services to the people of our communities, not to get revenue. That is what private sector does, right? Nike sells shoes. They make shoes and sell shoes to get money. We do things the opposite way. We raise revenue to the extent necessary to deliver services. We don't make profit. And I look at that as, those are some business things that make running county government and any level of government difficult. It's not a money-making activity. I was very surprised to know I would put operating a child care center pretty much in that same bucket of very difficult to operate in a way that makes it financially sustainable. The margins for child care are exceedingly small, and particularly one observation I had was, and you'll see this on this breakdown, we have a fair number of, let me see if I can find right here, child care provider regulation type. We have a fair number of providers, but we have very few large child care centers and a lot of licensed family, smaller operations. And what became true to me was, or the observation I had, it's very difficult to scale. It's very difficult to move from a child care center in your home where you don't have overhead, right? You think about all the things that you're otherwise paying for within your house, your heat, the building. Those are all sunk costs. You don't have overhead. You don't often have additional staff. When you try to scale that business, because that's what it is, it's a business, the numbers, the margins get exceedingly tight. So we started to brainstorm what we saw as the challenges within the child care environment. And now our next sessions, we have another session in July, We have a total of 4 sessions, but our second session is in July, and we have another already scheduled in August. But we'll wrap up in that August timeframe with that development, that strategic plan development work. And the next part then is the implementation of that strategic plan that we would bring forward. And that plan, just like the presentation you had today, we will bring that presentation to the board. There's $75,000 that the state is willing to provide us through this grant to implement the plan once we have it completed, but that is a board policy decision. If the board doesn't want to accept that money, you don't. You don't need to. But we're engaging with community partners and stakeholders. Wisconsin Workforce Development is part of our planning group, and hopefully we'll have a very sound strategic plan that we can bring forward to you for consideration sometime in August relative to execution of that plan. But to this point, it's been certainly an eye-opening experience, and I think a positive one. Our stakeholders on the group are very, very invested in trying to address this issue. I don't know if anyone saw the coverage in the local media recently. There was a large economic development summit. Many members of local businesses, Chamber of Commerce were present, and our local chamber president and CEO, Dave Ekman, was, and I'm going to paraphrase, but he was quoted within the story as saying, if you are a business and you don't view childcare as a business development need, you're already behind the 8 ball. I mean, that it really is something that is impacting not only individuals wanting to enter the workforce or re-enter the workforce, it is absolutely a talent development and retention issue for businesses. So happy to answer any questions. I don't have a whole lot of detail right now. We just had our first meeting. But to this point, it's been very eye-opening.
Thank you, Administrator. Can you send that link to the
Sure.
committee? Thank you.
Thank you, that's what I was going to ask.
Sure.
Are there any other questions to the administrator?
All right, thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thank you. Brings us to item number 8, next meeting time, location, announcements, and agenda items. 8A, committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. Don't forget, we will be talking about the strategic plan again next month. 8B, next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, August 3rd, 2022 at 3 p.m. Item number 9, adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? By Covelli, second by Arstead. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. We are adjourned.